Why did the laughter sting more than the rain? Maybe because it wasn't just noise, it was confirmation. Confirmation of everything they already believed. The sergeant's chuckle cracked through the misty morning like a rifle misfire. Not cruel in volume, but cruel in intent. Her shot had gone wide, the bullet cutting empty air where it should have cut the center. The others smirked, some outright grinned. Their faces carried the satisfaction of men who'd been waiting for proof, waiting to be right about her. Women don't belong here. Their eyes said it before their mouths ever needed to. Lowered the rifle, not in shame, but in something closer to stillness. Her fingers brushed the trigger guard one last time before pulling away. She knew what they saw, a failure. What they didn't know, couldn't know, was what failure meant to her. She adjusted the cap pulled low on her head, the brim shadowing the thin scar that ran just above her temple. The scar they hadn't seen yet. The scar that whispered of nights most of them couldn't imagine. Not yet, she wouldn't let them see it yet. The firing line buzzed with hushed exchanges. The range officer scribbled notes. Talon, the square-jawed recruit with arrogance carved into every syllable, leaned on his rifle like it was an accessory to his ego. His laughter carried the furthest. "Looks like quotas don't come with accuracy," he muttered, just loud enough for the line to hear. Even Sergeant Blackwood, their instructor, their judge, let the corner of his mouth twist upward. He didn't hide his disdain. He never did. Sat back on her heels, saying nothing. Words were wasted here. She had learned long ago, explanations don't silence doubt. Only proof does. But proof, she knew, had its time, and this wasn't it, not yet. The beginning had been quieter, but no less heavy. For it wasn't welcoming ground. It was built to strip you down, to peel away pretense, and leave only the kind of soldier who could stay unseen for 3 days on a frozen and still fire with steady hands. That was what the sniper program demanded: stillness, precision, and patience beyond pain. She had arrived with 23 others, 23 men and her. Their boots hit the cracked asphalt as the transport truck hissed to a stop. Most stepped down in clusters, already chattering about hunting trophies, deployments, competitions won. She stepped down alone, duffel on one shoulder, cap pulled low, eyes steady. Didn't look for a place to belong, she knew better. Sergeant Blackwood had greeted them with the kind of voice that didn't need amplification. Gravel and command rolled into one. Clipboard in hand, he scanned the fresh recruits with an expression that was less welcome and more warning. His gaze lingered on her, skeptical, sharp. 50% of you won't last past week 1, he barked. Another 25% will quit before week 3. The rest, maybe, will earn the title. A sniper doesn't get excuses. A sniper gets results. He looked right at her when he said it. The message wasn't subtle. Neither were the approving nods from a few of the men who wanted her gone before they even started. Kept her expression still, parade dress still, the silence of someone who'd heard it before. The first test had been mechanical: field strip, clean, reassemble under the clock. For her, it was muscle memory. Each part clicked into place with a rhythm she barely had to think about, like piano keys, like breathing. It didn't go unnoticed. Lieutenant, observing from the side, scribbled on his tablet without looking up. Blackwood, on the other hand, leaned closer. "Trigger feels light," he said, hunting for fault. 5.4 pounds, sir, she replied evenly. "Within regulation." His eyes flickered, irritation at finding nothing to break. Across the tables, Talon watched her with curiosity edged in challenge. His weapon already reassembled, he leaned casually, the weight of his stare like a gauntlet thrown. When barracks were assigned, Blackwood made sure she was stuck furthest down the wing at the edge of things. He called it limited accommodations. She called it predictable. Later, unpacking in the dim quiet of her room, she placed a photograph face down on the nightstand. The picture wasn't for anyone else's eyes. Not yet. A knock interrupted. Stood in the frame the kind of man who didn't waste words. He glanced around her Spartan quarters, then at her. settling in. "Yes, sir. I reviewed your scores," he said. "Impressive, especially under stress." She only nodded. "You're aware," he continued, "no woman has completed this program in 8 years." Her answer was steady. "Yes, sir, I'm aware." He left her with that, but later passing instructors in the hall weren't so guarded. 8 years, one muttered. Not for lack of trying, Blackwood makes sure of that. She heard, she remembered. She tucked the knowledge away. That night in the mess hall, the atmosphere changed when she entered. Conversations dimmed. Some stopped altogether. Talon was holding court, stories spilling from his mouth like bullets from a belt. "Buddy of mine at Fort Benning said a female candidate broke down crying during surveillance. Couldn't hack it. Had to be pulled out." The table laughed. "That won't happen here," someone added. Sat alone, tray balanced in front of her, scanning range calculations while the noise pressed against her back. Then a tray clattered across from hers. A recruit with dark hair and tired eyes sat down. He said, tapping his name badge, "Figured you might want company that isn't entirely made of assholes." She glanced up, not worried about guilt by association. He shrugged. "My sister's a combat medic, tougher than most men I know. I'll reserve judgment." It wasn't trust, but it was something. Blackwood entered then and all conversation froze. "Tomorrow, 0500 full gear, 10-mile hike, range qualification after." His eyes locked on her one more time. "Sleep well." She didn't, not exactly. Lying in her bunk, she stared at the ceiling, mind running in quiet loops. She knew men like Blackwood, knew their certainty that women in combat roles were dilution, not contribution. She could almost hear her father's voice again. Show them nothing until it's time. She let the memory steal her. Tomorrow, the proving ground would begin. Dawn came sharp, cold air fog hanging low. 24 recruits formed in line, packs strapped, rifles slung. Blackwood's eyes swept them, calculating. This course finds the ones who can carry weight when it matters. 10 miles, move out. The terrain punished them quickly, steep inclines, muddy descents, water crossings with gear weighing 60 pounds. By mile 5, 3 recruits broke. Timed out or dropped out, it didn't matter. They were gone. Stayed mid-pack, not the fastest, not the slowest, methodical, breathing through the burn. Talon kept glancing back, waiting for her to crack. She didn't. At a steep incline, Blackwood appeared at her shoulder, struggling. "No, sir." Her voice was even. "This terrain's nothing. Wait until you're hauling a spotter scope through a mountain pass. Different game." "I look forward to it, sir." That irritated him more than failure would have. He moved ahead. By the range, only 21 remained. Sweat-plastered uniforms, breaths ragged. Was controlled, but her chest rose hard. She didn't show it. "Hydrate 5 minutes," Blackwood ordered. "Then qualification begins." Targets lay stretched from 300 to 800 meters. Groupings mattered. Consistency mattered more. Leaned over. "Heard you cleared expert in basic, true?" She checked her rifle, true enough. "That why he's riding you?" Before she could answer, Talon's voice cut in, giving our diversity candidate some pointers. Didn't bite, just conversation. Talon smirked. "Sure. Hey, bet you 20 I put groups than you at every distance." "I don't bet," she said, still assembling. "Smart, you'd lose." His voice carried, 2 minutes, baseline assessment, your scores today set your standing. Lay prone, her cheek against the stock. The world narrowed to breadth and scope. Around her, bolts racked, safety clicks. Her father's words returned, patience, position, precision. "Commence fire." The range erupted. By the end, the results told their story. 5th overall, solid. Talon first, his smirk loud as the posted scores. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't failure, and sometimes not failing was enough for now. That night rain swept across Fort, gray skis pressed down, mud swallowing tracks. Blackwood's voice in the classroom was almost gleeful. Conditions don't stop a sniper. Rain, cold, wind. You deliver anyway. The obstacle course that followed nearly drowned them. Mud crawl with sandbags, barbed wire overhead, rain driving sideways. Finished behind the leaders, caked in mud, lungs burning. Blackwood was there, stopwatch ready. Barely met the standard, he said. Beat you by over a minute. In combat, that's an eternity. She stood, mud dripping from her jawline. Still within standard, sir. He didn't reply, just wrote. The recruits moved on to the firing line. Rain slapped the metal roofs, wind flags snapping wild. Blackwood announced, 5 shots, progressive distance. Miss 2 remedial, Miss 3 reconsider your place. His eyes found hers. Each recruit took turns. The wind wrecked some, humbled others. Talon did well, missing one, scraped through, nearly failing. Then's turn came. Blackwood stood closer this time, too close. His voice low just for her. Adjust your stance, fundamentals are wrong. They weren't. She ignored him, breathing steady. 10 seconds, he said louder now. You hesitate this long in the field, your team dies. The countdown shattered her focus. The shot went wide. Laughter erupted behind her. Talon's voice, guess quotas don't fix aim. And Blackwood's verdict, some people just aren't built for precision work. Her jaw clenched. The rain fell harder. Something shifted inside her. Slowly she reached up, slid her cap back. The scar along her temple caught the gray light. The whispers quieted. Her breathing reset into a rhythm only seasoned snipers knew. 4 in, hold, 4 out, hold. She ignored Blackwood's voice, ignored the weight of their eyes. The next shot cracked dead center. Then another, splitting the first. Then another. By the third, silence replaced laughter. By the fourth, Blackwood had stepped back. By the fifth, the bullseye disintegrated. The range was silent but for the rain. And Blackwood, clipboard lowered, pale, his voice barely above a whisper. Yours daughter. What froze him wasn't the sound of the shots. It wasn't even the precision. It was the realization. Yours daughter. The words slipped out of Blackwood like a confession, not an accusation, a truth he hadn't meant to say aloud. The recruits shifted, confused. They'd heard the name before. Everyone in sniper school had. Devon, the legend whispered about in barracks and rifle pits. The man who could hold an overwatch position for days without twitching, who'd scored shots that training manuals. To the recruits, he was myth. To Blackwood, he had been mentor, rival, and shadow. And now his daughter stood on this range, scar catching the rain, silence catching every breath. Lieutenant stepped forward, clipboard tucked under one arm, his voice carried the weight Blackwood's lacked. Not just his daughter, he said evenly. Staff Sergeant, Silver Star, Operation. Murmurs rippled. Talon's jaw tightened, his smirk finally erased. Blinked, recalculating everything he thought he knew about the quiet recruit who ate alone. Blackwood's face drained, but her file wasn't complete, cut in. The colonel made sure of that. This was an assessment of you, Sergeant, not her. The rain tapped harder, but no one moved. Rose slowly from her prone position, hands calm, rifle secured with the same precision as her shots. She met Blackwood's eyes without flinching. I didn't come here for special treatment. I came to make sure no one else is fair treatment. The statement landed like a round in the dirt, quiet but undeniable. The walk back to headquarters was heavy with silence. The recruits, usually noisy after qualification, moved in subdued formation. Shame clung to some faces. Curiosity clung to others. Talon finally stepped near her, not arrogant this time, hesitant. Staff Sergeant, I. She cut him off gently. Are you apologizing because you were wrong, or because I wasn't who you thought I was? He faltered, no answer came. That's the thing about assumptions, she said. They cost you before the shot even leaves the barrel." She left him with that, the words heavier than any lecture could be. Fell into step beside her. "For what it's worth, I figured you had something more, just didn't realize it was this." She didn't look at him, but her voice softened slightly. "Everyone here has something more. Most just aren't given the chance to show it." Ahead of them, Blackwood walked stiff beside, every step toward the colonel's office dragging like iron. Colonel's office smelled of polished wood and coffee gone cold. Commendations lined one wall, maps the other. The colonel himself sat behind a desk that looked carved from authority itself. "Sit." Obeyed. Blackwood remained standing, rigid at attention. The colonel's glasses rested on a folder in front of him. He opened it, eyes scanning. "Disturbing reading," he said at last. "6 qualified female candidates in the last 3 years, top percentile in preliminaries, all failed under subjective assessments, all under you, Sergeant Blackwood." Blackwood's jaw tightened. "Sir, the standards were applied unequally," cut in. He slid documents forward, the sound sharp in the quiet. "That's why Staff Sergeant was embedded. Her record speaks for itself. Her presence was necessary." The colonel turned to, "Your assessment." She didn't hesitate. "Systemic bias, sir, direct and indirect. Female candidates and some minority recruits received disproportionate criticism, less instruction, more obstacles, standards bent one way, never the other." She spoke clinically, detached, as if giving a range report, but every word carried weight. "Examples?" "This morning's qualification," she replied. "Sergeant Blackwood disrupted my preparation, applied pressure not used with others, declared failure before the shot was complete." Nodded. "It matches patterns we've observed." The colonel leaned back, eyes sharp. "And your recommendation?" "Restructure the program. 2 instructors minimum for evaluations, clear, measurable metrics, and removal of Sergeant Blackwood as lead instructor." The silence stretched. Blackwood's face flushed. "Sir, with all due respect." "Enough," said firmly. "Your combat record is exemplary, Sergeant, but this isn't about combat, it's about instruction. You've turned a program into a filter for your preferences. That ends today." The decision landed. Blackwood's posture remained stiff, but the authority had drained from his frame. His voice was calm. "Effective immediately, I'll assume primary instruction. Staff Sergeant will advise." Didn't flinch. This wasn't about victory, it was about alignment. That afternoon, the recruits assembled again at the range. The shift in atmosphere was almost visible. No jokes at her expense. No whispers when she approached. Only silence, heavy with reassessment. "Explain the new structure." Blackwood stood to the side, his clipboard clutched than his pride. The recruits began firing drills. Moved along the line, her steps deliberate, her voice quiet but firm when she corrected a grip, adjusted a stance, pointed out a wind call error. She didn't humiliate. She didn't grandstand. She taught. When she paused by Talon, she spoke almost as if they were the only 2 on the line. "Your 3rd shot pulls right." He blinked. "How did you?" "Shoulder tension," she explained, adjusting his stance slightly. "You're fighting your own body. Use balance, not force." He tried, fired. The shot landed cleaner. His eyes widened. "Better," she said simply, then moved on. It was a turning point. He'd remember longer than any reprimand. Later in her quarters, she packed her gear with the same precision as always. She placed the photograph from her nightstand into her case. This time, face up. The Silver Star ceremony, her father's hand on her shoulder, both of them in dress uniform, medals catching light. The memory surfaced, rain pounding on a rural field years ago, her teenage self struggling with a rifle that felt too heavy. "Why can't we wait until the storm passes?" she asked. Her father's answer had been steady. "Because excellence doesn't wait, it exists anyway." That truth carried her now, through mud, through mockery, through silence. Excellence doesn't ask permission, it just is. At Fort, something shifted over the following weeks. Recruits who had been on the edge of failure found footing under new instruction. Performance improved. Even Blackwood, stripped of authority, began teaching differently, less sneer, more precision. Notice she didn't praise him, she didn't need to. The recruit's progress spoke louder. Talon approached her once more during a break. His voice lacked swagger this time. I read about Operation 3 days without moving, 94 hours. How did you? Discomfort is temporary, she interrupted. Failure is permanent, that's the choice. He absorbed it, then nodded, this time without argument. Watching, smirked faintly. Guess even legends get tired of explaining themselves. Didn't smile, but something softened in her eyes. By the end of week 5, the colonel returned. He stood beside her as recruits nailed shots in difficult winds, as Washington and Santiago, once nearly washed out, now scored higher than they believed possible. Impressive, he said quietly, the program's strongest results in years. His gaze stayed on the line. They just needed to be seen. Nodded, your father would said the same. She didn't reply, but she felt the weight of that truth settle inside her. One evening, she traced her fingers over the engraving on her rifle case. The words were simple, truth finds its mark. She closed the case, ready for whatever range, whatever test came next. Because truth, like excellence, didn't ask permission. It persisted. What changes first, the recruits or the air itself? It was hard to tell, but something had shifted since the day the bullseye shattered into silence. Felt it every time she walked the range. The laughter was gone, the whispers too. The eyes that once dismissed her now tracked her with caution, with curiosity, with something dangerously close to respect. But respect wasn't the goal, not for her. She hadn't come to be liked. She had come to hold up a mirror to expose the cracks in a system built on preference disguised as standard. And mirrors, she knew, could be dangerous things. The second week under's command ran like a. The recruits, once divided into clusters of arrogance and survival, now began to operate more like a unit. Moved among them, quiet correction her only weapon. She noticed the smallest details, the way Washington's breath caught just before a trigger squeeze, throwing his shot left. The way Santiago's calculations were precise, but his body couldn't keep up with his math. She didn't scold. She adjusted. A word here, a hand on a shoulder there. They listened. Even Talon. Especially Talon. His arrogance hadn't vanished, arrogance rarely did, but something softer had cracked through it. He no longer challenged her with smirks. Instead, he sought her eyes after each sequence, searching for a nod, a correction, a sign he was moving closer to the standard she represented. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal crosswind drill, he approached her as the others packed up. "You watch everyone," he said. It wasn't accusation, it was wonder. "That's my job." "No, I mean, you see things the rest of us don't." Looked at him then, her gaze steady. "That's the point. A sniper's power isn't the rifle, it's attention. You notice before anyone else does, that's how you survive." Talon swallowed. "And I didn't notice you, not at first." The admission hung in the air, didn't ease it. Most people don't until it's too late. He nodded once, chastened, and walked away. Not everyone shifted so easily. Blackwood lingered on the edges, stripped of authority but not of presence. His corrections, when he gave them, were sharper now, more technical, less dismissive. Yet his resentment bled through in glances, in clipped tones, in the way his pen dug into paper when spoke. She ignored it. He wasn't her mission, the recruits were. But at night, when the barracks dimmed and quiet took over, she sometimes felt the weight of his stare from across the mess hall or the hallway or the range. It wasn't just resentment. It was recognition. He knew who her father had been. He had trained under him. He had failed under him, too. And now here was the daughter, carrying not only the legend's blood but his lessons, proving what Blackwood had tried to deny for years. That knowledge aided him like rust. Week 3 broke with another storm. The recruits were marched into the hills for a 48-hour overwatch drill. Two-man teams, rotating observation and rest, tasked with tracking a convoy target through mock terrain. Was paired with. The rain came hard, the wind harder, hours blurred. Mud seeped into boots, into bones. Shifted beside her on the ridge, binoculars pressed to his eyes. "How long can you stay like this?" he asked. "As long as it takes." "That's not an answer." She didn't move. 94 hours, that's the record. He lowered the binoculars, turning to her. "That was you." She said nothing. The silence was confirmation enough. Whistled low. 3 days without moving. How? She cut him off gently. "Don't ask how, ask why." "All right, why?" "Because the platoon needed me to. Because moving meant failure. And failure wasn't an option." Her voice was flat but heard the echo underneath. Not pride, not boasting, something colder, a memory that never left. He nodded slowly. "Guess some scars don't show." She adjusted her scope, eyes still on the convoy. "Some do, you just have to know where to look." Back at base, exhaustion clung to everyone. The drill had thinned their numbers again, 2 more dropped, unable to handle the cold and the stillness. 17 remained. Congratulated them. Blackwood said nothing. Sat alone that night, unpacking her rifle with ritual precision. The scar above her temple throbbed faintly, as it always did when storms pressed in. She touched it without thinking, fingers tracing the line. A knock at the door startled her. Blackwood stood there. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally he said, "Your father taught me. Advanced course 2009. Hardest instructor I ever had." His voice was calm. "Then you know what he stood for. No exceptions, no excuses, but no predetermined failures either." His jaw clenched. He believed in standards. "So do I. The difference is, he applied them equally." The words sliced clean. Blackwood didn't reply. He just nodded stiffly, as if acknowledging a truth he didn't want to admit, and left. Sat in the silence after, the scar burning. Her father's voice echoed in memory, patience, position, precision. But another whisper threaded through her own. Fairness. That's the real standard. By the end of week 4, the transformation was undeniable. Washington, once written off, now nailed sequences with breath control had honed. Santiago's math became weaponized, his calculations guiding teammates with speed even veterans admired. Steadied into a leader without trying. Talon, still arrogant, still bold, but now his arrogance was aimed at himself, his drive to push further, better. The class was no longer fractured. It was becoming something closer to whole. And watching from the firing line, felt a quiet pride she didn't let show. But pride is dangerous. It invites the question, what comes next? That answer arrived with Colonel. He stood beside her on the range, eyes on the recruits. "Fort has requested assistance," he said. "Their program is struggling. Same symptoms, different cause. They want you." Didn't look away from the scope she was adjusting. Another undercover assignment. "No, not this time. They know who you are. They're asking for you by name." She exhaled slowly. Change was coming again. Studied her. "You've done more than evaluate here. You've changed the program, and the people, that's rare." Didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her shots, her truth, had already spoken. That night she sat on her bunk, 2 photographs laid side by side. One of her Silver Star ceremony. One, more recent, of the recruits at Fort, mid-laugh, mid-struggle, mid-growth. Washington, Santiago, even Talon. She looked between them, the old and the new. Her father's hand on her shoulder, and now her own hand guiding others. Maybe that was the point all along. Maybe this was the inheritance. Not just the shot, but the standard. The next morning found her at the range, already in place before dawn. "You're leaving soon," he said. "3 days." He nodded, watching as she sent another round downrange, the bullet striking dead center. "Truth finds its mark," he murmured. Lowered the rifle, eyes on the target that no longer existed, splintered by precision. "Always," she said quietly. And the wind carried the word like a promise. What's harder, breaking through open hostility, or walking into a room where silence does the work for you? Wasn't sure yet, but as the convoy rolled her toward fort, the question kept circling like a crow overhead. Had been raw, loud, unfiltered. The laughter, the sneers, the pointed doubts, bias with its teeth bared, she could fight that, could shoot through it until the echoes went quiet. But fort was different. She knew before she even crossed the gate. Here the silence carried weight. No laughter, no sneers, just eyes that slid past her, records that didn't show the whole story, evaluations written in a language that looked neutral but bled unfairness between the lines. This was the battlefield she had been sent into now, and bullets wouldn't fix it. The first briefing confirmed it. Colonel Briggs ran the room, tall, polished, his ribbons aligned with a precision that spoke of pride in appearance. He welcomed her with a handshake, firm but cool. "Staff Sergeant," he said, "your reputation precedes you, is complicated, high attrition, low completion, numbers don't lie." His reply was measured. Numbers tell one story, not the whole one. The colonel's eyes flickered, interest or irritation, she couldn't tell. "You'll have access to files, training ranges, recruits. Observe, advise. We need results." Results, not fairness, not truth, just numbers. She nodded once, hiding the thought. The recruits had looked different from class. Younger, greener, less sure of themselves. Their uniforms crisp, their boots still stiff from issue. Among them 3 women. Watched as they stood at the edge of the group, shoulders squared but eyes cautious. They carried themselves like soldiers who already knew they weren't welcome. It wasn't loud, it wasn't open, but it was there. A joke that stopped when they walked past. A silence that filled the mess table until they left. A grading sheet that always came back harsher than their peers. Recognized it immediately. Bias doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and whispers cut deeper. Her first week was spent in shadows, observing, taking notes, moving quietly at the edge of drills. She didn't need to step in yet. She needed to see. What she saw made her jaw tighten. Candidate compact, discipline, breath control impeccable. Failed for inconsistent composure. Candidate analytical, quick to adjust for wind shifts. Marked down for lack of aggression. Candidate Ward strong under pressure, eyes steady on scope. Written off for poor adaptability, though her drills were cleaner than half her male peers. Didn't interfere, not yet. She watched, she wrote, she remembered. It wasn't just the instructors, it was the culture. At night in the barracks, laughter carried through thin walls. Not cruel laughter, not like, but dismissive. The kind that erases rather than attacks. Wasn't here, Talon wasn't here. She didn't have allies yet, just silence. But silence had always been her territory. She lay on her bunk, scar faintly throbbing, the photograph of her father on the nightstand. She heard his voice again. "Show them nothing until it's time." Time was coming. By week 2, the pattern was undeniable. During a long-range drill, Candidate adjusted for shifting wind faster than anyone on the line. Her shot landed center. The instructor scribbled notes. Lucky correction. Watching from behind, felt the words land like stones. She said nothing, but her silence wasn't consent. It was loading. Later, Candidate nailed a difficult moving target at 600 meters, a feat half the class missed entirely. The instructor called it acceptable. Acceptable. His jaw clenched. Afterward lingered at the range, packing her rifle slower than the others. Approached quietly. "You tracked the wind well," she said. Blinked, you saw that. I was supposed to. Hesitated, then lowered her voice. Doesn't matter, they'll fail me anyway. Looked at her scar catching the last light of evening. That's not your job to decide. Your job is the shot. Let me worry about the rest. Studied her then, eyes widening. You're that. Didn't confirm, didn't deny. She only said focus on the shot. Word spread quietly. By week 3, the 3 women began to stand, not because the instructors supported them, but because did. She didn't need to say it aloud. The recruits felt it. Her presence was proof that excellence didn't ask permission. The men noticed, too. Some sneered behind closed doors. Others reconsidered. A few, the smart ones, began to listen closer when spoke during drills. Truth doesn't need announcement. It just needs a chance. The first crack came during a storm-lashed qualification test. Wind howled across the range, rain needling down. Candidates were required to hit 5 targets at distances ranging from 400 to 900 meters. The instructors expected failure. Didn't fail, neither did. Each shot was measured, deliberate. The wind fought them, but they adjusted. Their groupings were cleaner than half the men on the line. Watched closely, every detail searing into memory. The way's finger stayed featherlight on the trigger. The way recalculated mid-shot without hesitation. And the way the instructors wrote their evaluations, lucky grouping, inconsistent form, not suitable for combat stress. His chest tightened. It was all over again, but quieter, deadlier. That night she sat in her quarters, rifle disassembled on the table. She cleaned each part slowly, methodically, not because it needed cleaning, but because it steadied her hands. Because anger, when left alone, becomes useless, but anger, when sharpened, becomes precision. And precision was her language. By week 4, she had enough. Colonel Briggs summoned her for an interim report. His office was neat, almost sterile. Well, he asked, what do you see? Placed her notes on his desk. Her voice was calm, clipped. Bias, direct and indirect, systemic. Candidates dismissed for reasons unrelated to performance. Standards bent without consistency. The colonel frowned. That's a serious accusation. It's not accusation, it's observation, the data in front of you. He flipped through the pages, his jaw tightened. And your recommendation? Restructure, standardized metrics, 2 instructor evaluations, exactly what we implemented at. Briggs leaned back, studying her. You realize what you're suggesting, careers could end. His reply was steady, so could futures, which matters more. The question hung like smoke in the air. Briggs didn't answer, not yet. That night walked the empty range alone. The storm had passed, leaving the air sharp and clean. She set up her rifle, prone in the mud, just her and the silence. Breath in, hold out, hold. Her father's voice again. Excellence doesn't wait, it persists. She fired. The shot cracked through the night, center punching the target at 800 meters. Again, again, again. 5 perfect holes in the dark. Proof. Not for her, she didn't need proof anymore. For them, for the ones coming after. She lowered the rifle, mud seeping into her sleeves, and whispered to the night. Truth finds its mark. What happens when silence isn't enough? Had built her life on it, waiting, watching, firing only when the moment demanded. But at Fort, silence no longer carried just discipline. It carried risk. Because silence was what they used against the recruits. And silence, left unchecked, could bury truth deeper than bullets ever could. The evaluations came in at the end of week 4. Stacks of papers, neat handwriting, cold verdicts. Candidate promising, but lacks composure under stress. Candidate technically sound but weak adaptability. Candidate Ward not competitive with male peers. Recommend removal. Flipped through the sheets in Briggs's office, her jaw tight, her scar prickling like a storm was coming. These aren't observations, she said flatly. They're pre-written dismissals. The colonel steepled his fingers, his face unreadable. Our instructors are experienced. Their judgments carry weight. So does performance, and performance doesn't match these words. He exhaled. Staff Sergeant, I don't doubt your expertise, but I have to balance optics. Too many washouts and the program looks broken. Too many passes and it looks compromised. Leaned forward, voice low. Compromise isn't fairness, it's cowardice. The word landed sharp. Briggs's jaw tightened. Careful, Staff Sergeant. Didn't blink. Careful is what got us here. That evening she found still on the range, sitting cross-legged beside her rifle, staring at the targets as if they were ghosts. Bad day? Asked. Gave a short laugh without humor. Bad evaluation, same thing apparently. Sat beside her, the mud cold against her uniform. They don't define you. Looked at her, eyes dark. Then who does? You, them, the record books. Because right now it feels like I could put a bullet through the moon and they'd still write me off for poor form. Let the silence linger, the way her father once had with her. Then she said, you know why my father taught me to shoot in storms? Shook her head. Because storms don't wait for permission. Excellence doesn't either. You don't shoot for them. You shoot because truth deserves its mark. The younger woman swallowed hard, the words sinking deeper than encouragement. They felt like orders. The next day acted. Not loud, not reckless, but deliberate. She called the 3 women aside after drills, set up a secondary range and drilled them herself. No stopwatch, no clipped criticism, just precision, patience, position. Breath control became a weapon. Calculations turned fluid. Ward, once tentative, steadied into rhythm. They improved rapidly. Word spread. Soon, others drifted toward her after official drills ended. Washington, Santiago, even Talon, his pride tucked away, showed up at dusk to adjust his shoulder under her eye. The secondary range became something more. Not rebellion, not mutiny, just proof. But proof, once gathered, couldn't be hidden forever. By week 5, the instructors noticed. Returned to the barracks one night to find Briggs waiting outside her quarters. His expression was tight, his voice lower than usual. You're running unsanctioned training. She didn't flinch. I'm teaching them what they're not being taught. That undermines authority. No, she said evenly. It restores it. Authority isn't control, it's trust, and they trust me because I see them. Briggs's silence was longer this time, heavier. Finally, he said, you keep pushing like this and you'll force my hand. His reply was steady. Force it then, but the truth won't change. The confrontation came sooner than she expected. Week 6, mid-range qualification. Rain slicked the ground, crosswinds vicious. Every candidate struggled except the 3 women, and Ward executed with a precision that turned heads. Their grouping charts were nearly flawless. The instructors gathered afterward, whispering, caught the words luck and fluke carried on the wind. Then the posted results went up. Marked as failed. Marked as marginal. Ward not recommended for continuation. The recruits erupted, not loud, not chaotic, but angry. Even the men saw it now, even Talon. This is bullshit, he snapped, pointing at the sheets. I saw hit dead center at 700. I missed, she didn't. How the hell is that a fail? The instructors brushed him off. Not your concern, candidate. But it was for all of them. Stepped forward, voice calm but cutting. Post the shot charts, side by side, every recruit, every grouping. The lead instructor's face darkened. That's not protocol. It's proof. Colonel Briggs arrived then, drawn by the tension. What's happening here? Turned to him, her voice steady enough to hold the entire range. What's happening, sir, is bias hiding behind procedure. Publish the charts. Let the truth speak. Briggs hesitated. The recruits waited. Even the instructors faltered. Finally, the colonel gave a short nod. Do it. The charts were pinned up, and silence followed. Grouping cleaner than Talon's, than half the class, wards stronger than 3 men already marked as passing. The silence turned into shame. Didn't gloat, didn't smile. She only said truth finds its mark. And the range was never the same again. That night Talon knocked on her door. He stood awkwardly, hands in his pockets. I was wrong, he said simply. Raised an eyebrow. About what? All of it, about women, about you, about the way things are supposed to work. I thought strength meant never admitting weakness. But you, he hesitated. You proved strength is paying attention. Let the silence sit. Then she asked, so what will you do with that? He blinked. What do you mean? A sniper doesn't just take a shot. He asks if it should be taken. What's your shot? What's worth hitting? Talon didn't answer right away, but his silence wasn't ignorance this time. It was thought, and thought knew was the first step toward change. 2 weeks later, Colonel Briggs called her back into his office. His desk was cluttered with new reports, fresh charts, revised scores. The program's numbers are the highest they've been in years, he admitted. Completion rates up, dropouts down, and yes, more diverse. Stayed silent. Briggs studied her. You were right. The admission cost him something. She could see it. You've forced us to face things we didn't want to see, things that make us uncomfortable, but discomfort isn't failure. You've reminded me of that. His eyes stayed steady on him. So what happens next? He leaned back, exhaling. We change, officially, permanently, and I'll make sure your name is written into that change. Shook her head. Don't put my name on it, put theirs, the ones who proved it. Briggs frowned. Why? Because this was never about me. It was about them, about anyone who comes after. Her voice softened then, almost like a memory. Excellence doesn't ask permission, it just persists. The colonel nodded, the words settling deeper than policy. Later that night, walked the range alone again. Stars burned overhead, the air still and sharp. She sat up prone, scope glinting under moonlight. Breath in, hold out, hold. 5 shots, 5 centers. She lowered the rifle, whispering into the night. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it just acts. And the silence after was her answer. What's the worth of training if it never faces the real thing? That was the unspoken question hanging in the air when the alert came. Not a drill, not a test, a mission. Colonel Briggs summoned them to the operations room late at night. Maps glowed under fluorescent light, red markers scattered across an unfamiliar valley. Recruits stood shoulder to shoulder, faces pale under the sudden weight of reality. This is a joint exercise with live operational parameters, Briggs explained. Intelligence suggests a hostile infiltration through this sector. Your task is overwatch and interdiction. You'll deploy as teams. Observations, reports, precision fire if necessary. The room fell silent. Even Talon stopped shifting on his feet. This wasn't theory anymore. This was the field. Stood at the edge, arms crossed, eyes sweeping the recruits. For weeks, she drilled them on patience, precision, responsibility. Now she would see whether those lessons had taken root. Deployment began before dawn. The valley stretched dark beneath a bruised sky, jagged against pale light. Cold wind cut through uniforms as the recruits moved into position. Paired with her steady presence matched by his quiet resilience, Talon partnered with Washington. Santiago rotated between observation posts, his calculations guiding placements. Blackwood wasn't here, and Briggs observed from the command tent, his face unreadable. The mission wasn't combat, not yet, but the possibility of it pressed against every heartbeat. Hours crawled, the valley stayed quiet, too quiet. Through her scope, watched movement, not hostile, not obvious. Farmers in the distance. A pair of children chasing each other near a stream. Life moving against the edge of danger. She whispered into the comms, "Hold fire, observe. Patience, always patience." By late afternoon the signal came. A figure moving along the ridge opposite, not local, patterned differently, equipment heavier, 2 more followed, then 4, then 7. A small unit, testing boundaries. Adjusted her scope, breath steady. She could have taken the shot, ended the lead target with one squeeze. But she didn't. Instead she whispered, "Identify, track. No fire unless confirmed hostile." Across the comms a voice crackled, "Talons, tight, impatient. They're armed, they're moving tactically, we should engage." "Not yet," replied. "Assumption isn't proof, proof comes first." Her words carried more weight than order. They carried memory. Talon exhaled hard but stayed his trigger. The figures moved closer, slipping between cover, their gear catching faint glints of light. When one lifted a rifle with optics, scanning, the confirmation came. Voice over the net, "Hostiles confirmed, green light." The valley shifted in that moment. Adjusted, breath steady, tracked wind, calculating. Washington spotted ranges with crisp precision. Talon leaned into his rifle, the impatience replaced with control. Fired first not for kill but for signal. A crack through the air, the lead hostile dropping. Chaos followed. The recruits answered in rhythm, their shots not scattered but deliberate, each one placed with intent. Through her scope saw it, lessons coming alive. Control holding against panic, adjusting mid-gust. Talon resisting his urge to rush. Steady beside her, relaying observations with calm certainty. The firefight didn't last long. 7 hostiles down, none escaped. The valley went quiet again, save for the ringing in their ears. Extraction came at nightfall. The recruits loaded back into transports, mud clinging to boots, adrenaline still hot. Inside the command tent, Briggs debriefed. His words were clipped but weighted. Minimal error, maximum precision, better than projected, well done. He looked at them, something almost like respect softening his features. Your methods proved themselves. Said nothing, proof didn't need words. Back in the barracks the mood shifted. Laughter carried, not mocking, not dismissive. Relief, pride. Talon sat on his bunk, rifle across his knees, cleaning it with unusual care. When past he looked up. His voice was quiet. "You were right about waiting, about proof. I wanted to fire, but if I had, I'd have been wrong." Stopped meeting his eyes, and he hesitated, then said, "And I don't want to be the sniper who fires before he knows. Not anymore." She gave a short nod, that was enough. Later, alone in her quarters, unpacked her rifle with ritual calm. Her scar throbbed faintly, memory pressing against the present. She thought of operation. 94 hours in snow, her body numb, her mind fraying. The target had taken 3 days to confirm. She could have fired earlier. She could have guessed. But she hadn't. Patience, position, precision. That was the lesson. That was the inheritance. She laid the rifle down, fingers tracing the engraving on the case. Truth finds its mark. And tonight it had. But missions end, questions don't. Because knew what was coming. Fort would change, yes. The program would improve. Recruits would graduate who once would have failed. But systems resist. Bias bends but doesn't break easily. And out there beyond bases, beyond programs, the world still tested in harsher ways. She wondered how long truth could hold against it. Then she remembered the valley, the recruits, the shots placed with discipline and restraint. Long enough, she thought, long enough to matter. 2 days later, Colonel Briggs called her into his office. He stood behind his desk, not seated this time. Papers scattered, phone lines quiet. "Command has requested a full report," he said. "They want to know why our numbers shifted, why our attrition dropped, why our outcomes improved." Stood silent, waiting. "I'll tell them the truth," Briggs continued. "That it was you, your methods, your presence." Shook her head. Tell them it was the recruits, the ones you almost lost, Washington, Santiago, Ward, Talon. Briggs studied her. Why not take the credit? Her voice was calm, steady. Because credit doesn't change systems, proof does, and the proof isn't me, it's them. The colonel exhaled slow. You sound like your father. Didn't reply, but inside she heard the echo. That night she wrote a letter she wouldn't send. To her father, long gone but never silent. You taught me patience. You taught me precision. You taught me not to move until it was time. I think I finally understand. Excellence doesn't ask, it proves, it waits, it endures, and when the shot comes, it leaves no doubt. She folded the page, tucked it into her journal, and lay back on her bunk. Outside, the wind howled. The storm pressed against the walls. But inside, she slept steady. Because storms didn't scare her anymore. They were just weather. And excellence persisted anyway. What happens when patience runs out? Asked herself that as the call came in, not from an instructor, not from the colonel, from command itself. A real deployment, not training, not evaluation, combat. The recruits, still candidates, not yet snipers, were being fast-tracked into a live operation. An insurgent group had taken position in a mountain village, holding civilians as cover. Observation was critical. Precision fire would be required. There was no time to wait for a fully qualified graduating class. It was reckless, it was desperate. It was real. They deployed at night, helicopters cutting through thin mountain air, rotors chopping rhythm into their bones. Sat at the edge of the ramp, rifle secured, her eyes on the valley below. Beside her shifted, this isn't training anymore. No, said, it never was. Talon sat across, hands tight on his rifle. His face, the same one that once smirked at her, was pale but steady. Closed her eyes, whispering calculations under her breath. Exhaled in practiced rhythm, fighting nerves with breath control. They were ready, or as ready as anyone ever was. The helicopter dropped low, skimming the ridge before touching down on a crude landing zone. The team spilled out, boots sinking into cold soil. The night swallowed them whole. The overwatch position was brutal, jagged rock, cutting wind, thin air. They crawled into place, setting scopes on the village below. Lanterns flickered in windows. Shadows moved. Armed men patrolled rooftops. Civilians, women, children huddled in corners, caught between silence and fear. Scanned through her scope, every detail burning into her mind. Positions confirmed. 7 armed. Civilians present. No clear lines of fire yet. His voice came back over comms. Hold until command authorizes. Hold. The word was familiar, but harder now, because every minute held risk, every second danger shifted. Patience was survival, patience was torture. Hours passed, the cold cut deeper, the recruits rotated watch but barely blinked. Her scar throbbed under her cap, memory pressed. 94 hours, snow biting skin, the target moving at last after days of waiting. 1 shot, 1 platoon saved. But this wasn't snow, this wasn't waiting, this was civilians under threat, children in the line of fire. And patience felt like betrayal. The authorization came just before dawn. Green light, said. Targets confirmed hostile, protect civilians at all costs, call your shots. The valley tensed. Exhaled. Rooftop left, the alley guard, Talon main door sentry, support, Washington, Santiago range corrections. Her voice was calm, clipped, steady. Her pulse was not. On my mark. The village seemed to hold its breath. Lanterns flickered. A guard turned his head. A child shifted in a window. Whispered, now. The rifles cracked. Target dropped clean. Shot split center. Talon's round struck hard. The patrol collapsed. Chaos followed, shouts, running feet, weapons raised. Fired, each round precise, deliberate. Called movements, Washington relayed distances. Santiago corrected for shifting wind. The recruits moved as one, not perfect but precise enough. Hostiles fell, civilians remained untouched. But then a door burst open. A figure dragged a child forward, weapon pressed to the small body, a human shield. Scope locked, her breath froze. The scar burned. Again, snow. The target who had used a captured soldier as cover. She remembered the face, remembered the hesitation, the hours of patience undone by a single impossible decision. She'd taken the shot, perfect, the soldier lived, the target didn't. But the memory never left. Now it was happening again. The recruit voices filled her comms. Options, we can't get angle, they'll kill the kid. His voice was steady, though her hands trembled against the rifle. I have it. Staff Sergeant, Talon's voice sharp. I have it. She steadied her scope, adjusted for height, for angle, for the thin margin of space between life and death. The child's face was pale in the dawn. The hostile's grip was tight, weapon pressed hard. Exhaled, breath in, hold out, hold. Her father's voice, patience, position, precision. Her own voice, truth finds its mark. The shot cracked. The hostile dropped, the child stumbled free. Silence slammed the valley. Then shouting, civilians rushing, hostiles scattering, the firefight ended in minutes. His rifle lowered, her hands cold against the metal. She had done it again, the impossible shot, the one no one else would take. The scar burned hotter, because every impossible shot left a wound. Extraction was chaos, helicopters lifting civilians, medics patching recruits, commanders barking reports. But amid the noise, the recruit's eyes found hers. Talon no smirk, just respect. Pale but steady. Exhausted but proud. Quiet but grateful. They had done it, not her alone, all of them. But knew, some shots belonged to one person only, and she had carried it again. Back at base, the debrief ran long. Colonel Briggs stood at the head, voice firm. Minimal civilian casualties. Hostiles neutralized, precision above standard. This was not just a success, it was proof. He turned to, your recruits performed beyond expectation, and you, his words faltered, you carried them. His reply was soft. No, sir, they carried themselves, I just gave them a chance. The colonel's eyes flickered. For once, no argument, just silence. That night sat alone again. Rifle case open, photos laid out, her father, the recruits, the faces she had saved, the faces she hadn't. The scar burned under her fingers. She whispered to the empty room. How many more shots? How many more times can truth carry the weight? No answer came. But maybe there didn't need to be one. Because tomorrow she knew there would be another range, another recruit, another storm. And truth, if nothing else, persisted. What do you carry home from war, medals, scars, or silence? Asked herself that as the helicopters lifted them out of the mountains, the valley shrinking below. The recruits sat around her, mud still on their boots, exhaustion etched into their faces. Some stared blankly into the dark, adrenaline drained. Others whispered low, trying to stitch their nerves back together with words. Talon leaned against the wall, his jaw tight but steady. Sat with her head bowed, lips moving through quiet calculations even now. Exhaled in slow rhythm, keeping control when there was nothing left to control. They weren't candidates anymore. They weren't just trainees. They were survivors of their first mission. And survival changes everything. Back at Fort, the base seemed different. Same walls, same ranges, same mess hall, but the recruits walked taller now. Their steps carried weight, not of arrogance but of earned truth. The instructors noticed, so did Briggs. The debriefing stretched long into nights, reports written in dry military language that failed to capture what had actually happened, the split-second hesitations, the impossible shots, the choices no chart could measure. Didn't bother trying to explain it all. Reports were for records, Lessons were for the living. She walked the line each morning as they resumed drills, correcting a stance here, a breath there, her presence steady as ever. But now the recruits listened differently, not because she had proven herself, because they had proven themselves. And proof carried further than orders ever could. A week later, Colonel Briggs summoned her again. His office was less sharp now, papers scattered, coffee stains marking maps. He looked older than when she'd first arrived. "You've changed this program," he admitted. "Completion rates are higher than we've seen in years, dropouts lower, and morale different." Stood silent, waiting. Briggs studied her. "You could stay, take official command, make this permanent." She shook her head slowly. "Not my place." The colonel frowned. "Why not?" "Because permanence isn't in the instructor. It's in the standard. If I leave and it crumbles, then it was never real. If it holds, then it was worth it." Briggs leaned back, exhaling. "You sound like your father." His jaw tightened faintly. "I sound like myself." And for the first time, the colonel nodded as if that answer was enough. The graduation came under a pale morning sky. 17 stood where 24 had begun. Not all had made it, but more had than anyone expected. Stepped forward, her certificate steady in hand. Followed, her eyes brighter than when first saw her. Ward held her head high, no longer shadowed by doubt. Washington and Santiago, once nearly cut, now grinned like men who knew their worth. Even Talon. He didn't smirk this time. When his name was called, he looked straight at, nodding once in quiet respect. They weren't perfect, they never would be, but they were ready. When the ceremony ended, the recruits gathered near her, not with formality but with something closer to family. Spoke first. "We wouldn't have made it without you." Shook her head. "You made it because you had it in you. All I did was clear the mud." Smiled faintly. "Sometimes mud enough to bury you." Didn't argue. She just looked at them, at all of them, and let silence carry the truth. That night she packed her quarters. Her movements were precise, ritualistic. Rifle case closed. Journal folded. The 2 photographs laid carefully into her bag, her father's hand on her shoulder at the Silver Star ceremony, and the recruits of Fort, mud-streaked, exhausted, but alive. She sat on the edge of the bunk for a long moment, scar burning faintly under her fingers. Her father's voice whispered in memory, "Show them nothing until it's time." Her own voice rose to meet it, "Truth finds its mark." She wasn't sure if she believed it completely. Not yet, but belief wasn't the point. Persistence was. At dawn, she walked the range one last time. Empty now, save for flags snapping in the wind. She sat up prone, rifle pressed against her cheek, scope cutting through the pale light. Target stood a distance, silent witnesses. Breath in, hold out, hold. She fired. One shot, then another, then another. 5 in total. All perfect. She lowered the rifle, the silence of the range folding around her. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The recruits would carry that silence with them, into the mountains, into the deserts, into every place where precision mattered more than noise. They would carry the lessons of patience, of fairness, of seeing what others refused to see. And silent, steady, would move on to the next field, the next storm, the next truth waiting to find its mark. Because storms pass, systems resist, people doubt. But excellence persists. Always.